part. You
Okay.
want to do Jason's part?
I'll do it. Hey, welcome to Roger That Chronicles, where we veterans that are sitting around the table here talk about issues that we believe that other veterans would be of interest. We have a great show for you today. My name is Rick Prescott.
My name is Jason Hertha, Marine Combat Veteran.
And I'm Mike Ruffner.
And I'm Jeff Bruce.
Nice to see you there. Be sure to view our previous podcasts. You could also catch us on YouTube, Spotify, Twitch, Apple. And we want to thank our producers where we are broadcasting from 216 The Net. Behind the camera was me for a hot minute there. Also, don't forget to check us out on YouTube. Hit the bell notification for future videos. Hit the like button, the share button. It helps us out with the algorithms in spreading the message to veterans. And thank you.
Hoorah.
And we are pleased to have with us today a Marine veteran currently in the Army Reserves. And he's going to talk about the geopolitical stuff with Saudi Arabia because he got to spend 13 months acclimating to their environment. Former Marine, Master Sergeant Jeff Bruce. Welcome aboard.
Thank you. Hoorah.
We've been really excited about having you on board here. This has been a while in the making, really, and it's great to have you here.
I appreciate it.
Welcome to Roger That Chronicles.
Glad to be here.
Let's launch this. Why don't you tell us, if you will, a little bit about, you were in the Marine Corps at one time. What years did you serve? What did you do? Give us a little background.
Yeah, I did. Let's see. My first contract started in 91. And I was, I grew up in the kind of the south suburbs where mom worked at the church, dad worked at the hobby store. Didn't have much opportunity for a lot of college because I was definitely not a great student in high school, kind of bending the rules to, have fun as a teenager.
Sounds about right.
Yeah.
Did the same thing too.
Sound like a good reason to go in the Marines.
Yeah, and I needed somebody to put me on a straight and road.
Same here.
So that's why I looked at the Marine Corps. And it was funny too. Mom was so mad. She's still mad to this day. I got to interviewing the Army and the Marine Corps. And then when I was finally a little confused about which one I wanted to set off into, I invited both recruiters to meet at my parents' house at the same time and didn't tell them.
That's awesome.
You didn't tell either recruiter?
No. And then it was funny too, because then I went shooting with the Marine recruiter several times, and I go on over to his house, and he was displaying my targets like they were his. It was funny. So
That's hilarious.
yeah, it was a good time. But no, I'm glad I went to the Marine Corps. Marine Corps is great to me. It really put my life in a whole new stratosphere that I could not have done through any other means. It definitely made me a better man by my time in service in the Corps. And it's given me stuff that you just can't put value to and the contributions it's done to my life. So love it. No, I went in open contract. Well, of course, all Marines do. But it was one thing that I liked about it, or at least I went in with the belief that the Marine Corps would assess me and figure out where I fit best. And then they told me I'm 0311.
Oh, wow.
That's right.
So pride of the Corps.
Yep.
I went straight. I knew what I wanted to do. I went straight infantry, so no open contract for me.
Nice.
And this was older. What is it? During the 9/11 period. So I'm like, yeah, I want to go all the way and do infantry, fight for my country, and all that stuff. So
Cool.
Yep. I went in as a pilot. Yeah, you didn't know that, did you?
See how that worked out.
No, what do you
Yeah.
fly, desk?
No, what? I went in as a pilot, and the sergeant said, "Hey, you." I said, "Yes, sir." You go, "See that pilot over there?"
Pile that. Working party extraordinary.
Secondary weapon is a mop.
So anyway, you transitioned from the Marine Corps, and eventually, somehow or another, managed to find yourself in a fine group in the United States Army. So how did that happen?
Yeah, so let's to build that up, a little understanding in the Marine Corps. I was part when Fox Company 25, 2nd Battalion, 5th Marines,
Hoorah!
most highly decorated unit in all the Marine Corps. They picked up the MUSOC mission, which is the Special Operations Capable. So then they took our various line companies and kind of trimmed them up, and then started sending us to different special operations schools. So so we were an amphibious raid unit, and I specialized in demolitions and assault climbing. So I climbed rock, ice, soft earth, and getting units up and over different types of terrain. But so that really opened up the doors for me for other things that I did in life, which is kind of neat. Because then when the Army was looking for somebody that had some special forces or special operations background to be able to team up with the State Department, other branches of service, to include special forces, special operations, Homeland Security, other agencies, to work in an international mission, I had that background.
Perfect.
So that's what brought me into the tour going into Saudi Arabia. So, but no, but to better answer your original question, why, from a bigger picture, why did I switch from the Marine Corps to the Army? As some of us like to call me, a conflicted Marine.
Better you say it than I. And I really mean it.
Yeah. But you say it with love, Mike. That's
Well, we all say it with love.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
No, I like, kind of like Jason here. I kind of looked at it. Well, I got off active duty and I was completely out, got my honorable and that kind of stuff. And then 9/11 happened. And I'm sitting there thinking, man, I got a lot of training and stuff and looking at my life. And I'm like, we're going to war. And I know if I get back into service, there's a better chance that more of them will get to come home if I show up again back in service. So I did.
It's funny how we think that way.
Yeah, and it was a moment too, because I ended up going to Joliet, which was artillery at the time. Got classed over to artillery, 08-11, and then and it was funny because I showed up as a lance corporal with wrinkles and hash marks on my blues at the ball the very first day in. They looked at me, they're like, "Who did you piss off to still be a lance corporal?" Like, it is what it is. But yeah, and then it went from there. And then got out, finished my contract there. And I missed service again. So I wanted to get back in right around in 2008, that kind of time frame. So
Right.
I went back to Joliet and talked to them. And they're like, yeah, you got too much training. Well, I wanted to become a financial or do something that spoke to my day job, because explaining to clients as a financial advisor, yeah, it's great that I can help you with your goals and your money, your insurance and tax. And then they had asked me, what do I do in service? I'm like, yeah, I specialize in demolitions and special operations stuff and infantry. And they're like, what's that got to do with my portfolio? Not a damn thing, but let's not make it a bad conversation because it could go wrong.
Yeah.
No, but so I wanted to get back into service and do something that had a little more connection to what my day job. And I wanted to be a career counselor in the Corps. But that they're held on the wing side, and the Marine Corps, Joliet was not going to let me leave at the time. They were the recon unit to go over to the wing side to be a career counselor, and so, but the Army did, and it just happened to be at that same time frame. That's when the Marine Corps was handing out early outs. There were all my friends that were serving out of Joliet were starting to get kicked out at 15 years because they had to shape the force. So it worked out well for me to be able to maintain staying in service to our country, but not have to deploy too much or worry about getting kicked out
Right.
so much with bigger organization being the Army.
Right. Wow. Interesting.
Thanks.
Quite fascinating.
Yeah.
Well, well, you do currently in your civilian job, you're a financial advisor.
Yes.
Did you want to put a plug in for your company, the name of your company and so on?
Yeah, sure. No, I'm a financial advisor. My team is here out of Crystal Lake. let's see. Something I love about my team, we got a team north of 20 individuals, and the majority of them volunteer or participate locally with charities. We've won multiple awards being best place to work in McHenry County for several years. We're very actively involved with the community. We have, I think, 6th generation Crystal Lake people are at the firm. We got over 5.7 billion under management, and that's billion with a B. So I don't know exactly how many clients total for the firm. And we share more of a collaborative approach is something that I really like, because I think any one individual trying to do this job and the complexity of the world as it is today is a bit of a nightmare, and it creates opportunity for errors if people fall prey to their own. You can't stay on top of all the changes happening with how fast change comes today.
Right.
So it really helps having a team that you can bounce ideas off or self-check, that kind of thing.
That's awesome.
So yeah, I feel really blessed to be part of the team I'm with and be part of the families that care about me for with being the clients that I serve, and it means a lot.
Well, you had somehow or another received orders go to Saudi Arabia on a deployment.
I did.
And tell us about that.
First sergeant, being a first sergeant, one of the best jobs ever. We'll see. I'm 30th on the list for picking up sergeant major. We'll see how that goes.
Ooh.
But so far,
can you imagine that? Calling him sergeant major.
Call him Sergeant Mage.
Smash.
Sergeant. Hey, sergeant.
Sergeant.
Yeah, but it doesn't make any difference. No matter what your rank is in the Army, they call everybody Sard. You could be the most senior MF there, or you could be a boots.
It's funny, as you get up into these senior enlisted ranks, you start to lose your identity, and you don't notice it until you get to like when you pick up master sergeant or first sergeant or sergeant major, because like if you're a sergeant first class, that kind or staff sergeant, whatever they call them, or sergeant, they call them all sergeant. But then once you pick up master sergeant, they start to call you master sergeant, but they also drop off your last name. So when it's just really weird.
Mhm.
You
Yeah,
just
that's
lose
crazy.
your last name, and you're kind of like, all right.
But you got orders, and you ended up in Saudi Arabia. How long were you over there?
Really, it was a 14-month tour.
14 months. But you were there, I think, longer than 14 months.
No,
It seems like longer to me.
Well, thanks.
Well, when you're
Well, I guess
napping all the time, anything will seem longer. So
Yeah, we know how deployments really go.
So you went over to Saudi Arabia, and you became part of the military aid group.
Yeah, so I was there underneath the program called Security Cooperation, and it's where the U.S. was providing for a fee to Saudi Arabia that they completely covered the cost, so it was not a cost to the U.S. taxpayer. Service members from various branches and civilians that would come out there and do training. So that was our piece of the pie, and so we were training their security and their special forces.
Fantastic. I can kind of relate, sort of, as a Marine security guard working at the American Embassy in Athens, Greece.
Mhm.
We had what we refer to as JUSMAG. It was Joint U.S. Military Aid Group out of Greece, and it encompassed the Army, all of the branches. They had a Marine major there, a few officers there that represented the Marine Corps. It was a maritime nation, those type of things. So we saw what they did in reference to from back then in '79. It was a geopolitical type of situation back then, in the sense that history between Greece and Turkey, for example, where they were both NATO countries even at the time, but there was some contention there because of their past. And I won't go into the details, but if you gave Greece tanks, you better darn well give Turkey tanks, and vice versa, and so on. So we saw how that kind of played, and the American role in maintaining not only that peace, but supporting those two nations and having them return a support by being members of NATO. So kind of an understanding there, but how does that fit in to the Saudi Arabian thing? I mean, this was an amazing experience for you. Tell us a little bit about your experiences in Saudi Arabia in that particular regard.
It's really hard for Americans in continental U.S. to see the world on a big picture and to understand how it's all connected. And this is one of the points why I was excited to be part of this conversation today, is the program's called Security Cooperation. 2021, the U.S. had over 200 legal agreements with other countries to share in either military sales, military training, government type of collaboration. And it's because the U.S. is literally one of the most powerful leaders in the world. We are the drivers of world peace.
That's a good point.
We really are. Ultimately, we are. So much of the world is more and more countries, as time moves forward, becomes driven more by contract law and economics. And because those things influence the way cultures think, behave, how they feed their populations, most of that is denoted in US dollar. So when our dollar fluctuates, it really puts either pressure or alleviates pressure on different countries. So, and you saw that clearly with 2012, Obama and Congress didn't pass the budget. What happened? U.S. stopped paying its bills. Okay, great. And then we had to shut down our commissary here at Great Lakes, and U.S. service members and stuff like that. Various aspects of our government just couldn't pay the bills. But then what happened to the U.S. bond at that time? It rallied. It went way up. The reason why, and then we saw that before I get into the reason why. And what happened with our debt ceiling problem that we just had too. If you clicked over at international news instead of watching just our news, a lot of other countries were fearful that if we hit our debt ceiling and we stopped paying our bills, what would happen again is the US dollar would strengthen. Makes you wonder, why would it get stronger? Well, the reason being is most of the world looks at the United States as being the only country on earth that plays by our doctrine. If our leaders start making changes on the fly, they're doing nothing but acting like kings and other forms.
We play
of government.
by the rules.
We play by our rules, yeah. And then we have a process to change those rules, and we follow those processes. So because of that, the US dollar is the strongest currency in the world. And that's why most legal systems of countries are structured just like ours, because we went out there and taught them how to do it. And they follow our way of doing it. And they recognize the US, even though we have our own problems, we see it internally. The US is the most faithful government that so far we've been able to figure out as a human race.
What I'm wondering here is that is fragile.
Yeah.
That can be fragile. I mean, if you get another system that has a strong, like a yuan, for example, like the Chinese currency, if they finally get themselves to stable enough where they can rule other countries, like they're moving in, they're extracting their diamonds, they're taking certain amounts of their resources and so forth, and they get them dependent upon that. Is that a threat to the American system?
Absolutely is. It's part of the geopolitical risk, and that's why we have these security cooperation programs that we do, is because if we team up with other countries that also share influence on a global stage, then we're able to better the life for our U.S. citizens and influence global peace. Saudi Arabia, for example, they're the sixth highest amount in revenue in military sales in the world.
Wow.
Just in general. And they're yes, they do produce 7% of our oil consumption that the United States uses. But a lot of people get a little confused when they think about oil, because yes, if Saudi affects their oil production on a daily basis, that hits the supply chain as a whole, and it could move the price. So even though we're a net exporter of oil now, and the first time in U.S. history of us being a net exporter of energy happened in, I think, 2015. So it's most of our country's history, we were not exporters. We needed to depend on other countries for our energy. Now we could at least we could depend on our own, but at what point can we depend on our own and be profitable so that our economy stays positive? That's where we've seen a little rub in the last few years, when Saudi messes with their oil production, or the problem with Ukraine and Russia is because if that oil supply on a global scale changes.
So they still control that mark.
Some of it, yeah, but
enough of it.
Yeah, their influence, of course, has been changing dramatically, because once we became a net exporter, we really reduced their influence on energy. So, but there's still a very, very valuable partner to have.
Now, is there a downside to that? Because what I'm thinking about is recently China had gone between Saudi Arabia and Iran and negotiated right under everybody's nose a peace agreement where Iran would stop its proxy forces out of Yemen and so forth, sending over drones and bombing their oil infrastructure. And they actually settled a peace between those two nations. So is that the downside? I mean, we create this manipulation where, okay, Saudi, you don't have the strength as much as you did, or influence like that, and all of a sudden they go to somebody else. Is there a danger here?
Yes. I think when it comes to global politics, first off, a little disclosure. Anything that I'm saying on this podcast is I'm not speaking on behalf of the U.S. government.
Oh, that's a good disclaimer.
I am a current serving U.S. member of the military. I am not speaking on behalf of the U.S. military, Department of Defense, Department of State Department, or any country. I'm not speaking on behalf of Saudi Arabia or the Ministry of
my
Interior.
question is completely academic,
Yeah,
and
so
as opposed to policy or anything like this. It's totally academic from a college professor's point of view.
perfect. Yeah, and it's just my general assumptions and observations that I see.
Right.
But from what research I've kind of done on open internet kind of stuff is more about yes, most countries really they're out for their own interests, just like Americans are. I mean, by right.
That's the international system.
And so whoever's going to give you the best deal, do you buy your products by going into Target, or do you buy your products through Amazon? Where are you going to get the better price for whatever you're looking for? And so each country has their independent, or many countries have their independence to, okay, is our internet cheaper from the US or is it cheaper from China? And who's going to, now we did broker the first deal with Iran. So the first peace deal between Saudi Arabia and Iran, we helped broker that one. But stuff has changed within Iran and Yemen, and there's been some uprising of some religious sects that are more extremists that has been they've been going to war with Saudi Arabia, and we've been there to help contend with that, and providing arms and such to them to help defend themselves against some of their more extremist groups. So Saudi Arabia has been a very influential key partner in our war on terror.
That's a good point.
So they're hugely important on our war on terror, which we felt the bad side of that when we kind of backed off from promoting those type of relationships, and we saw that build up to what happened with 9/11 and other threats.
So we can be assured that we are good friends, good partners between the United States and Saudi Arabia, between the family and so forth. We are good. We're solid.
Well, that's always subject to change.
Well, international politics always is.
Yes, but for right now, they continue to progress in the direction that makes them, that makes their country more and more the way the U.S. would like to have a relationship with somebody.
Right.
With
that's beautiful.
I mean, some of the progressive things that they've done, which is just mind blowing. How long did it take the United States to allow women to vote in our country? Since the starting of our country, what, 1776 to what, early 1900s?
150 years.
150 years. Saudi Arabia became a country in what, the 40s, and women first got to start voting in the 60s.
That's a good point, because we like to have this opinion that they are not only backwards, but they're in the 18th, 17th century kind of thing, and I'm like, wait. But when you bring that out, it only took like 40 years for them to advance to that. They're a growing nation. And what were they back in the 1950s, for crying out loud? They were tribal people on horseback and camels.
Yeah, that's probably where, if we look at the way our politics are, a lot of those Arab countries, what do you see when they have elections? Everyone's going around with their finger with that got the ink.
Yeah.
The way they identify that they voted. We don't know how our vote's going, but they go around and it's all over. They make a big deal about it because they're proud to vote. It's like, we can learn from that.
Wow.
Yeah. So in every society goes through pain of change. And not to say everybody gets it right. I mean, the U.S. has done many things through change that we have not gotten right. We've tested pharmaceuticals on our military. We have, beat up our own human rights violations. We've experienced. But the thing is, the reason why a lot of countries look to our military as being the strongest military in the world is because we've also made more mistakes and changed to become successful than any other country in the world.
When I compare other countries, even Canada, I lived in Canada for a long time. Even Canada, they had during my time there a major issue between the Anglophones and the Francophones, the English and the French. And you go to Belgium, as incredible as Belgium is, between the French and the Walloons and the Flemish, they have conflict, and they put a pile of their resources in trying to sustain and maintain a country under those type of environments. And we have this contentious type of harmony between our diverse elements. And for some odd reason, despite those diversity, we're not what do they call it? It's like instead of bringing everybody into the same fold, we're all a bunch of same people. We appreciate this diversity, Black American culture, Hispanic American culture, the Poles and the Swedish and so forth. And what we do is we brag about all of the different types of foods that we can eat, and we all share this. But somehow there's this underlying thing that makes us all one thing, and it's Americans. And as a result of that, we're able to grow. Mm-hmm. We're able to grow, maintain an economy, and become a military power, et cetera. And over and above that, not only the other things, but military factors, you consider a strong population, wide range of land. We've got 2 shores that we can ship things to, and we have a production, we have resources and so forth outside of all of that. But other nations have those same type of things, like Canada, and they're not as powerful as we are, and they won't be until they fix those type of issues and so on. But in Saudi Arabia, they had their issues too, because if you think about it, they had their various tribes, but somehow or another, the Saudi family figured out how to unify those tribes. Can you explain that?
Oh yeah, that's interesting. So this is definitely not a formal explanation. This is a very summarized explanation that I got from a Saudi friend of mine, who is helping me in Saudi Arabia. I think Saudi Arabia is on its 3rd king of the kingdom right now. And what's different about this king, and I'm not talking about MBS, Mohammed bin Salman, he's the prince right now. He's the one that makes the media the most. But the current king, what he did in their world, their tribal laws are definitely are very impactful, much more than like in our Anglo-Saxon ways of doing things, our clans and our versions of tribes. The influence of tribal law under Anglo-Saxon is kind of dissipated, 300-400 years ago. But in the Muslim world, tribal law still very much has influence. So, and if you can't, between the different tribes, you can't harm somebody within your tribe. If you do, not only will you pay, but generations going forward in your life will pay. So, and that's why we have the split of the Shiite and Sunni in the Muslim world, right? Because there is some trouble thousands of years ago where somebody harmed somebody and ended up helping split that faith. And that's continued and become a very dramatic thing that's influenced wars as we know it in our current day. So what the current king did is because you have 3 main influencers of power. You have the Saudi government, which is becoming more and more of a democracy. You have the king, and then you have the king, and then you have the clear committee, which is also influenced by their tribal rules of doing.
Okay.
So what he did, which I thought was quite brilliant, is he married a woman and had a kid with them from 28 of the largest tribes in the country. Therefore, he is actually related tribally to all the big influencers of tribal law in the country.
So he has at least 28 wives.
Yeah,
I'm moving to Saudi.
I know, right?
I'm going.
What makes you think you could have that many?
They gravitate to me. That's why I joined the Marines, so I could fight them off at the beaches.
Yeah,
Anyway.
well, they're trying to beat you over the head by getting away from you and shit.
Anyhow,
Wake up, you're dreaming.
Yeah. So
he married somebody from each one of these 28 tribes, and he had a child.
Yes.
And what's the significance of that?
Well, what it does is it keeps the different tribes not within their understanding of their rules from being able to act against the king.
Oh,
So pretty much he brought peace between the tribes by creating relations between them.
that's like what they did during the divine right of kings, the kingdoms throughout Europe and so forth. They started marrying off cousins and things like that to try to maintain the peace.
Yeah.
It didn't work in Europe. If World War I proved that, I'm wondering, will it work in Saudi Arabia? It has, it seems.
It's been working for a little while, for quite a while. And the younger generation, Saudi Arabia has got a lot of their population is very young, like under the age of 40, and they're definitely respecting that change, and they're open for more of a democratic type change to their country,
Fascinating.
in their culture, which is interesting because you look at other countries over the history, how have they dealt with their progression from tribalism to some type of a king ruler of the society to some kind of a democracy or whatever structure of government they're using today.
Right.
So, you look at how did England deal with the Scottish and their clans? They used their military. How did we dealing with the Native American Indians? Sadly, we've used, some of our military a little too much in some of that, where I thought it's quite
a little too much.
Yeah. I thought it's quite interesting how Saudi Arabia did it. They just chose to make love, not war, for that aspect of influential power.
That's amazing. That truly is amazing. It's ingenious. And the only way that they can come up with that solution is utilize a cultural type of solution.
We'll see.
And that's what they did.
Yeah.
Wow.
Sex does solve everything.
That's what I'm saying.
Hey, it works.
I thought,
Yeah, but you ain't getting any, Rick.
That's why I want to move over there. Age of 28.
Sure.
Hey, ladies.
I'm
Here I am.
sure if we check
They'll be
with
like,
Laura
"Look,
right
that
now,
smell."
she's getting the ticket ready,
Yeah, sweetums.
getting your passport and tickets ready.
And divorce papers.
yeah.
So to kind of backtrack just a little bit, you do the financial advising stuff. So what type of services, if there's veterans out there that are looking to either start their own business or become financially free or just have a better grasp on their finances, what type of services do you offer? And for me, I got my own business and all that. So like I have every aspirations of being like really financially free. Do you coach people, or does your organization coach people in doing that sort of thing?
Yes. Yeah. A lot of when it comes to helping people make decisions around finance, tax, insurance, it really kind of does come around to the coaching element of it. Yes, there's all the analytics about, the why or how I help people reposition their money, taxes, or insurance so that they're ready to deal with phases of life that they have not yet seen, which is an important thing.
Right.
Because, you got to have, as life changes, you too must change what your financial foundation is.
Right.
But when it comes to helping people make sense of okay, I'm at this stage, which direction do I need to go, or what decision do I need to make, and what are the risks or the benefits associated with those decisions? That's the kind of stuff where I step in. So, and I do that with, of course, the investments. I do that with, we just had the Secure Act come out, Secure Act 2.0, which changes a lot about who inherits IRAs, how that works, how the taxes are going to work. When do you have to start taking money out of IRAs? Because all that's changed. And some of this legislation has become very big and impactful. And some of that legislation, it started in 1979 and did not change until the pandemic came around. So we had one change in 2020, and now we had another change this year. And it's interesting. So, but same thing with taxes. Taxes, of course, just like our politics, change quite often, and staying on top of that so that either you're not getting yourself in trouble or you're making wise decisions so you could stay in a good financial light. It really helps.
Right.
Let's jump back over to your unit. Tell us about some of the interesting and fun stuff that you did when you were over working with the Saudi military.
Oh, yeah. So it was interesting. Like one of the highlights, I would say, is my team. When we were there, we were the first team to have female interpreters brought into the program.
Oh, that would be interesting.
So that was
Get your mind out of the gutter, Rick.
Yeah.
That's what I'm thinking.
and yeah, those are Saudi dates. So help yourself. They're pretty yummy.
Is that the real thing?
Those are real thing.
You got these from Saudi Arabia?
It's the only date you're gonna get.
Yeah.
Sorry, I had to throw that in there. Well played. Thank you.
Anyway,
No, so I had to, which was presented some concerns as a leader of the group about, okay, how are the students going to listen to a female, and what are their behaviors and how is their culture going to accept this? Not to mention sitting there looking at other Saudi officers, my counterparts, going, excuse me, but do you guys even have a bathroom? And they're like, no, we don't have females on this base ever. And so I'm like, okay, well, that's changing because your government just changed it. And we got to play by the rules. So yeah. It was neat too, because some of the female interpreter, like one female interpreter, she was, I think, 24.
Wow.
And she had a master's degree in English. And she found out real quickly that I like dad jokes. So every day she brought me a dad joke. Seriously.
That's awesome.
Yeah. That's what was great.
That's awesome, man. I love it.
And then Reem, the other female, she was awesome. If a student got out of line, even though she knew how to manage things really well, she was very quick at handling, like, her interpersonal skills were definitely very skilled, and she could correct somebody and be polite about it. Gotta love that.
That's something that we can all learn.
Yeah.
I wish I could learn that.
We're trying to teach you.
We're praying.
I know. Did I call my kid idiots?
So no, my team was awesome. I had one of my medics. She had something similar to a doctorate degree where she was developing vaccines before she came on the tour, and she was stellar smart. And then for fun, we would when we were not on a Saudi military base, when we were back at our compound. We had this thing that we would call arts and crafts, where she would bring chicken cadavers and teach us 5 different types of sutures. And that was our arts and crafts time.
All right.
So,
somebody brought you a Saudi outfit. I forgive me for my ignorance, but I can't remember what it's called, but it's the robe with the headgear, the knife system and so forth, the belt. You have some of this here.
Yeah. So here's the jabaya, which is a traditional
Jabaya?
Jabaya. Yeah.
Jabaya.
Yeah. Traditional knife that's really only used for ceremony now. But yeah, I got that full white garment that men wear called a thobe. And then one of my interpreters, so that was given to me from a student, and another interpreter got me the gutra, which is that thing that looks like a red white picnic blanket, but really the pattern is there to represent from back, like in the biblical days of Jesus teaching people how to fish. It was the fishnet. So it's really, that design is not Prophet Muhammad. It's prior to Prophet Muhammad. So back in the days, that's familiar to our Western culture and faith.
I'll be done.
But so that's where that pattern comes from. So kind of interesting. No, but the
interesting.
Yeah, I was. You want to hear the story about the student that gave me the thobe, the white garment?
Go for it. Let's hear it.
Okay, so this was kind of a moment about clashing of cultures a little bit, because as an instructor or the person in charge of instructors accepting gifts from students, there could be some ethical concern there, right?
Sure.
So a little concern about that. So show up at the range. We're teaching a shooting course, and we're unpacking the back of my vehicle. My interpreter looks in the back of my vehicle and he finds a gray garment thobe back there. And he looks at me, he goes, "First Sergeant, why do you have this one? This is the wrong one." I'm like, "What are you talking about?" And he goes, "Well, this is an Egyptian one. You should have a Saudi one." And so I'm like, "Well, Omar, I brought that because if I'm in my U.S. uniform and if I have to change a tire, I break down on a road, I needed to cover my uniform so I'm not broadcasting myself in foreign countries in an unofficial way." And a student hears this and he comes by. "First Sergeant, tomorrow I bring you the right Saudi thobe." Good student shows up, dry cleaned, brilliantly white thobe in the hanger and the plastic, and then gives me another bag of stuff to go with it. And I'm really confused. So I look at the student and I look at my interpreter and I'm like, "What's all this stuff?" And so my interpreter starts going through the bag And he's like, oh yeah, here's the right type of t-shirt that you wear underneath the thobe for, the proper way to do it. And the right kind of pants, which to us in Anglo-Saxon or Western culture, we would call those knickers because they're kind of like smaller pants.
Oh, they're underwear.
Yeah. Well, plus the underwear too. And so
plus the underwear.
The underwear.
You're talking
too
about
was
the
in there.
knickers that go over the underwear.
Yeah.
Oh,
exactly.
good Lord.
So all this stuff. And so I'm quite confused. So I look at my interpreter and I look at the student and I look back at my interpreter and I'm like, let this be the first and last time another man buys me underwear. So
yes, that's awesome.
But he is great student. He did good in the class. So there's definitely, nothing wrong with that. And I feel quite honored that he went out his way to get me such a nice gift and do it quite thoroughly.
Fantastic.
All the way down to the skivvies.
So we can call you Lawrence of Arabia now, huh?
Yeah.
Yes.
Did they give you a camel to bring back?
Yeah, no. And when I was there, because thus us in military humor would enjoy this one. One of the goals that I set for myself when I went to Saudi Arabia is I wanted to find a midget camel. I really wanted to find a midget camel to bring home. And so every time I found a camel farmer, I was asking him like, okay, so who's the weird guy
midget?
who's breeding midgets? Because I want to buy one.
Do they have such thing?
No.
Oh, okay.
And they love their camels there. So every Saudi I ask, they're like, no, that's insulting. Stop asking that question. Like, all right, well, I thought it'd be fun. Oh well.
Yeah, can you imagine him going through Algonquin, walking his camel to take a crap someplace?
That'd be hilarious. Well, the other thing too is I don't know, kind of a cultural conflict here too. I remember I was driving up through Wisconsin one time. I was going through Shawano, and there was a camel. It was during Christmas time, so there was a camel. They bring the camels in to do all these plays and so on at churches and so on right around Christmas time. But this camel was tied up on a water trough, like a wooden thing, a structure outside of a bar. And I called my buddy on the phone and said, hey, you guys have a camel up here? He goes, yeah. He goes, give it a moment. It'll be on the menu. Only in Wisconsin, right?
Yeah. And that's a really good dish, by the way.
Yeah.
Get a chance to eat camel.
So you have eaten camel?
Yes.
You tried a camel eye?
Not the eye.
No. Okay.
No, it's well, here in our culture, we eat veal. Right?
Okay.
Baby deer. And there they have baby camel, which is hashi. So, and it tastes very much like a kind of a cross between roast beef and brisket. It's really soft. It breaks down really good. It's really yummy, almost like a Wagyu version of brisket if you were to go that direction.
Nice.
That's the way I'd sell it.
Yeah, so it's good.
Really yummy stuff, and it's not cheap. Like a full one might be close to $4,000 US.
What have you learned? I mean, in your point of view, and once again, this is an academic kind of question. What have you learned about the American relationship from international affairs? Because I know here you are in Saudi Arabia, you had exposure to other nations as well. Other nations are there as well. So you were rubbing elbows with European countries, with probably Great Britain, and even the Canadians for that matter, and even the Soviets, or not Soviets, but the Russians. They're still Soviets to me. But they're even
showing your age, Rick. Showing your age.
Yeah, I know. But even the Russians and so on. What experience? What would you say in reference to like the geopolitical situation of the American involvement in international affairs? What would you say? How would you say that the relations are? How would you define it today? I know it's a broad range type of question. That probably doesn't make any sense.
It is, but what a lot of people don't think about is what global competition means. Because a lot of times here in the U.S., we think about, you got the small retailer here in town trying to compete against the big retailer like Walmart or something like that. How does that work? And how do you feel about it? And what choices you'd make. But on a global scale, it's like, okay, like Saudi Arabia is a good example. Who runs their boot camp? Because they don't have the infrastructure to have as much thoroughly designed training as the United States does, where we create all our own schools and we have all the infrastructure to support it, where they're smaller. Their population is just about the size of Texas, when it comes to a population standpoint. So they leverage other countries to come in and teach some of that stuff. So who runs their boot camp is the Pakistanis. So when the Pakistanis invited me over for tea, I was like, no. I will get my State Department, and then we could go talk. But yeah, so no, and then other countries were there. So England was there. You know, you have I met people from England that were working with the Ramco and other countries. That China is there, you know, providing technology and such. And so kind of back to, you know, every country really wants to do what they can for their citizens that's best. You know, you got to look at different cultures are willing to make decisions because of different reasons. Some are more utilitarian than others.
What's interesting here is it seems to me that the Saudis have a different model. We Americans tend, it seems to me, that that from an international relations point of view, we like other nations to be a little bit dependent upon us. The United Nations, we pay for it practically. The NATO, we encompass that in such a way that they're dependent upon us for military might and so on. Saudis, they have a lot more money than we do, and they've got trillions of dollars from their oil rich and everything else. I mean, take a look at what they're doing with sports today, without getting involved with the details of it. So, you know, you get $100 million to pay to a guy to go over there to golf, for crying out loud. So I'm not being critical of that. What I'm suggesting is that they have enough money to build their own military, to purchase their own might, and to train their own people, but they seem not to care for that too much. They seem to reach out and do what other nations don't do. They network.
Yeah, but you would have to take a look at the background is that we have almost 250 years military experience of how to operate and how to make things happen. And the other thing is when you talk about money, keep in mind, they've only been around since after World War II. You know, so they haven't really had the length of time that we've had. And the United States is one of these, you know, money talks, BS walks. And that's the reason why Europe probably gets upset with us is that we throw the money to get stuff going while they sit there and with, you know, twiddle their thumbs and argue about this, that, and everything else. It's like, we put it down and let's make it happen.
It's fascinating.
So, and you know, a good way to think about it too is we all got a friend that has a much nicer car than he should, has a house that's more than they could afford, and they go out to eat way too much, and they spend a lot of money, and then if you really crawl and look into what's going on with their money, they're drowning in debt. We all know people like that. Not saying that Saudi's drowning in debt, but the United States is by far has much more money and global influence than Saudi Arabia does. The difference is in the United States, our taxpayers help make decisions on where money goes. And we have a certain code of ethics that we follow about the use of our money. We don't take our government money and just throw it at sports teams. Where Saudi Arabia, they have a different government structure. They can do that. And it's also what's in line with their strategy. They got their 2030 strategy going on, and they're trying to move the needs of the country away from natural energy over to tourism. So they're willing to make substantial investment as a country in things like golf or different types of energy without having to use the oil. So they're building that Nome city, which is fully sustainable. And what they're put in what we saw at UAE with Dubai and all their efforts on tourism. I mean, they got billboards that are so big, it takes you more than 30 seconds to pass it driving 90 miles an hour.
That's pretty awesome.
Huge billboard. Yeah. I mean, you go into into the mall of Dubai, they got a TV screen that goes up 4 stories. It's just huge. You know, and so, but it's just how, you know, what's in line with your national strategy, which, by the way, if nobody's read it, here's the national strategy, because I have that stuff, you know, where is it? What's the longer term vision for your society, and where are they going?
So you have a paper here on the American national strategy.
Yeah.
Is that military or in a general sense?
No, that's the presidential national strategy.
Does this explain? I think you use the term dime.
Yes.
This is dime.
Yes, that is dime.
For the benefit of our listeners, can you explain dime?
Yeah. So 2 things. There's one. Where's the other one? So dime is diplomatic. I stands for intelligence or information. M stands for military, and E is economics. So what that is that's the 4 main powers of influence that any government has in the world.
So diplomacy, information, military, and economics.
Yeah.
And that defines a government's influence internationally.
True.
Okay.
So, and I'm looking for it. Is this it? No, they're actually, and so that's the way it's been thought about by scholars when it comes to global power and influence for many, many years. But it just got updated in 2018 to a better acronym, and I'm just looking for it, and I put it somewhere,
Oh, don't worry about it.
probably at my desk at the office.
in your car.
Yeah. So when I find
You
it,
might have left it in the bathroom down the hall.
darn it.
Rick will get it.
All right. Anyway.
We got about 10 minutes left.
Okay.
So
some interesting stuff that people kind of don't know. What kind of U.S. jobs gets provided because of the United States collaborating with things. So this is more on an economic side point. So we got 2021, the U.S. brought in over 157 billion from other countries in these types of programs. How many U.S. jobs does that create?
absolutely.
And or how much defense budget does that offset?
Right.
That's a big number. Saudi Arabia alone, because of their problems with Iran and Yemen, they buy our Patriot missile system. And they recently they spent 2021 they spent 3.05 billion alone in just buying our Patriots. That's
Wow.
excluding the programs that they were paying for that I was involved with, which is more training, that kind of thing. But Ukraine, we talk about, it's all over the news. Ukraine's been paying us over $2 billion a year since the 90s. So the help that we're giving right now, it's not really that we're giving out free money for U.S. citizens' money to Ukraine, where we need to sell our equipment so that we can develop new equipment, and it keeps the cost lower to the taxpayer. That if we need to make updates to the Abrams tank, then we could take our old tanks and sell it to somebody, not at a profit, but at least get a fair value out of it. And now we have a jump start as to having funds to buy the newest tank when our innovation or invention here in the United States creates something that's better than what our competition has.
Which is guaranteed.
Yeah. So it really helps having these collaborative relationships across the world from an economic and strategic defense posture.
What experience have you had? I mean, you were over there for 14 months.
Yeah.
Came home.
Yeah.
How did that experience enrich in your life?
Oh, it really opened my eyes a lot to understanding more of the why and being able to listen to the news and kind of go, okay, yeah, that's too many adjectives that I need to have in my news. I need a little more facts coming out of that. Call it what it is.
Yeah.
But yeah, to be able to kind of weed through that a little quicker and then be able to know how to go, okay, yes, if it sounds like it's somebody's trying to sell me a way to feel on that idea because it's the media, okay, where do I go to try to find a better fact, which is a hard thing for any U.S. citizen to try to figure out. Like, where do I get a better fact and not spend too much time trying to be a scientist to understand something that I don't know if I need to understand it.
So you're not so influenced as you are realistic. So you become realistic as a result of that experience. You understand the truth behind it because of the facts that you were exposed to, and now you can tell the difference between that and media propaganda or whatever.
Yeah, it really kind of helps with that perception.
Beautiful.
Which media besides BBC, was there any other media outlets? Because BBC is kind of neat to watch, only because they're not being filtered by the United States.
I really like Reuters a lot.
Yeah, Reuters is a good one.
Bloomberg does a pretty good job. Some of their channels do get a little skewed in one direction or the other, but often they have some pretty good stuff. Sky News, which is a pretty good one.
What do you think of Al Jazeera?
I was just going to go there.
Thank you.
So Al Jazeera has two different parts to it that share the name. There's Al Jazeera, and I believe they're out of Qatar, so which is definitely influenced by their government. But there's Al Jazeera International, which is not overly influenced by the Qatari government. So it is interesting between those two stations, which ones you watch and what information you get.
I've seen some awesome reports come out of Al Jazeera International. I'm like, wow, that's brilliant.
Yeah, they do some good reporting.
Yeah, it threw me completely off because when I first started, it was definitely slanted news, anti-American, and then all of a sudden, boom, it just turned into something really awesome.
So one of the other epiphanies that I had learning about the Muslim world is how dramatically different the different countries are and the cultures are within them. Like how much, the culture is different in Qatar, which is really small, or Bahrain, which is really small compared to Saudi Arabia, versus, Iran or Afghanistan or other Muslim countries. But one thing that they all share that I think they do a really good job is how neighborly they are. They like if you show up definitely at a Saudi's door, it's part of their culture for several reasons. It's part of their political their pride and nationalism. It's part of their faith, and it's part of their tribal ways of doing stuff. If you show up at their door, they have to let you in and feed you and let you stay for 3 days before asking you your name.
Oh, there you go, Rick. Free food.
There you go.
I'm going.
Yeah, you can travel.
I'm all about free food. So
28,
So
28 wives.
boom.
yeah, and they have almost very little to almost no theft in those countries, because if you leave your wallet out, somebody will stand there and watch it for hours waiting for you to come back and get it.
Is that right?
And it's not so much because their legal system will hurt people. Yeah, and that's not the biggest influencer. It's more of their faith that's the influencer on that.
I'll be darned.
Which is interesting. So
Interesting.
because their faith, like I talked about earlier in our show, if somebody does something wrong, not only will they pay, but for generations will pay. In our culture, if somebody does something wrong, that person goes to jail and it's kind of done. Their kids or their grandchildren is not going to pay for that crime that grandpa did.
Ooh, that's
You know what I
pretty
mean?
strong, though. I mean, that's
So that's why in
Yeah,
those
but it
cultures-
works.
Yeah.
talk about peer pressure.
Yeah, maybe we need a little bit of peer pressure in this country,
So I do give some props to certain aspects of those cultures and then their community and how neighborly they can be
Right.
for some of those reasons.
Wow. Well, I'll tell you what, it's a fascinating discussion here. Absolutely incredible. But unfortunately, it's we only have so much time.
Time to go. Okay, so please, if you like what you hear, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to this podcast. Pass the word on YouTube. Hit the bell notification, hit the subscribe button, hit the like button to help the algorithm and spread the message. Check us out on Spotify and 216thenet, Apple, and Twitch. I'd like to thank our producers, 216thenet, for producing the show.
And you know what? I got to say thank you so much, Jeff, for being here.
Yep,
This is
thank
just
you
a
very much.
Fantastic thing. I've been itching, biting at the bit for this show, and to have you here is just it proved very valuable. Just fantastic. Our next show is going to be on August the 3rd. It's a must-see program. You got to be there for this one here. Mr. Joseph Phelan, United States Air Force, Vietnam, 1964 era, and so on, is going to describe for us his experiences in Vietnam as a pilot. And he wasn't just a pilot. He was a rescue guy, on a chopper rescue guy.
Wow.
285 rescue missions in his incredible career.
Wow.
And so, but anyway, he's a member of the United States Air Force. He's going to be here to share with us his amazing experiences. So I hope to see you guys there.
And we want to thank our viewers and listeners for attending today. If you have any comments or recommendations or anything else like that, you can contact us at McHenryCountyMCL.com and just put in the info stuff and the information will get to us. Additionally, we want to tell you veterans that are out there is that we strongly encourage you to get with American Legion, VFW, AMVETS, Marine Corps League, American, the Navy Relief, Navy League. There's all kinds of organizations out there. Get connected with the veterans, not only for the fun and camaraderie that goes on there, but you may be qualified for some additional assistance for you and your family that you may not be aware of.
Right.
And the only way you're going to find out about this is not by the news media, not by barracks lawyers and sea lawyers, but getting with people that actually know what they're talking about, some of these experiences. And get out and volunteer because this is what we do.
Awesome. And we will see you on the 6th of August. Looking forward to it. Thank you for being here.